In this video, I'm going to work on bringing in stuff for Xdebug from the old machine sandbox. From the documentation in the app Underdog, I have these notes for my Xdebug configuration. The first thing I'm going to do is copy these into my xdebug.ini file. I copied them from Sandbox to TextMate. I'm shutting down Sandbox and I'm going to start up this one, small sandbox. Before I start copying these into the configuration, I want to get an idea about this because I know the ini file in small sandbox does not have the full path like this to the .so file. So I want to see if this .so file actually exists in small sandbox. I noticed that that directory does exist and it has a whole bunch of .so files including xdebug.so. So I'm going to have it the way that it is here, like in my old sandbox. Here's what it looks before, and here's what it looks like after. And I know that PHP is configured to use this Xdebug configuration right down here is the proof. Apparently, Xdebug has to be in profiling mode so you can use it with PHP Storm. And that's why the directive xdebug profiler enable equals 1 is here, in spite of the fact that we also have enable trigger equals 1. Earlier, I had said erroneously that PHP Storm does not need the profiler to be enabled. Okay, if you read this, basically what it says is that this link, my.cnf, and I'm in small sandbox, by the way. Okay, so what it says is that my.cnf points to etcalternatives.mycnf, which actually points to mysql.cnf. So this is a pretty good hint that this is the main configuration file. There really is no other configuration file except, okay, let's go into conf.d here. cd conf.d. Okay, let's see what's in here. Here we have a file. Of course, every file in here gets loaded from the main configuration file. So these are being loaded. However, this one has nothing practically in it. And this one, let's take a look at it right now. Sudo edit mysql dump.cnf. Okay, that's what this one has in it. Okay, so let's get out and go back. Okay, so except for the mysql dump.cnf, which was in here, this is the file that has all the configurations which actually configure the MySQL daemon. What I just said is not completely accurate because there's another directory here with a very similar name to this one, which actually has the default directives in it. This one and this one, when you do a listing, they look very similar inside. However, the files inside this one are for me to put in my custom settings, and this one is for the developer of MySQL to put the default configuration directives in there. Right now, I am editing mysql.cnf on small sandbox. And I see something that is pretty messed up. What is messed up is the order of these two statements. I think this one should come first because this one has the default settings and this one has my settings, which I would like to have override the default ones. Being that this is screwed up, I am just going to put all my settings in this file. I will only use the values in these two directories just to know what the default is or what in the past I have set mine to be. I'm going to do this for all of my environments. I'm going to do it for small sandbox. I'm going to do it for sandbox. I'm going to do it for the production server. Before I begin adding stuff, I just want to point out that this is what I have right now based on the previous videos. I'm going to be adding stuff below this section here. The mysqld_safe section is weird. It works both ways. The way I have it below is the way I had it before the migration of the configuration. Okay, and that's the way I'm going to have it right now in small sandbox, which is the way it looks like over here. Okay, so I'm going to go in and type that. So I added these lines for the section mysqld safe right here. The comment says the new way is commented out because I used the old way. And this is the new way, which I don't use. Next, I'm going to deal with the client section. Right now, I want to decide whether I should keep it like this or change it. And I'd like to know why I've had to customize it. Correction. Just because it's here doesn't mean that I've made it as a customization, because I copied everything that wasn't a comment from the configuration. So I've decided I'm going to put this in here in my file just the same way as it is right here. I went and actually looked for this section in the configuration for small sandbox, and I could not find it. So I'm going to go and look for it in sandbox and see what I can. I did find that section in sandbox in mysql.cnf. All right, I did figure out where this section is found, but actually it doesn't include everything that I have because it doesn't include the port, but it includes the socket. Okay, let me exit and you'll see which file this is. LL. Okay, we were looking at debian.cnf. Okay, I'm also going to take a look in Debian start to see what's in there. And it's just a bash script. So knowing all I've shown, I've decided to just keep this the same way it is. I'm going to put it over here, although this socket part is redundant. I decided to just make a comment rather than put in a redundant definition of socket. So I'm done with this part and I'm going to move on to the next. While looking at this section over here for mysqld, I noticed what I thought was something that's wrong, which here it says port equals 3306, the same as for the client. But based on my research, it seems that here it's just notifying the clients that the daemon is running on port 3306. So there's nothing wrong with specifying this down here. So I added port equals 3306 and I got rid of all the tabs and just used spaces. You know what? In the spirit of not having too much duplication, I'm going to not have this line here because it's probably already mentioned in the defaults. And the same goes for all the other ones that are mentioned in the defaults. I'm not going to put them here. So I'm just going to go and check to make sure that there's nothing from this section that I need to add. I've concluded that none of these I don't need to add anything based on what's here, and I already have these two lines have already been added. Okay, I am done configuring, or at least I'm done adding my old configurations. What I have discovered is the reason that I went in the file that's in conf.d and added this and commented this out is actually to make it the same as in the default configuration. So this is actually mentioned in the default. And the reason that I copied it is I didn't want to have any ambiguity, because although I pretty much knew that this, which is in the default, was getting loaded, because as you know, the defaults are getting loaded last. So although I knew that that should be the default, but just to make sure, I also did it in the conf.d directory. There's a .cnf file in there which specifies it like this. Okay, so the only reason I have this is just to make sure I know which configuration it is. Now down here for client, apparently the new Debian doesn't need to tell its clients what the port of the daemon is. So I could have even left this out. So the only real important configuration which would have been necessary to have my settings is pretty much what's over here. I mean, all over here, all this. Now, as far as these ones are concerned, I think these are pretty much a lynda.com thing, because the regular configuration does make allowances for having a slow log file, except it just doesn't do it this particular way. So I think this is a lynda.com way. Okay? So I think this does it for the configuration of MySQL. Of course, I'm going to have to restart the system for these changes to take effect. This is the end of the video. There's going to be other videos which continue the setup of a virtual machine, but for this video, I'm done.